Today we're going to edit an object drop into a glass with a reflection on a mirror. And this was an image that was done a few years ago that I'm going to demonstrate on. The key with this is you want to pick an image that has a lot of good white balance, interesting action going on. If we zoom in here, you need to check to see, like maybe what you're going to be editing and so forth. So what I'm going to do right now is I want to bring my exposure up a little bit, bring my clarity up, which is going to bring out the details a little more here. So I'm going to zoom in. I really want to look at the top of this water because I don't want to lose any detail here. So I'm going to bring the clarity up a little bit. And I'm going to bring the shadows down, which kind of shows up in the glass a little bit. Some of the blacks down, which will make it darker. Add a little bit of vibrance, a little bit of saturation, add a little contrast, bring maybe down the highlights a little bit. And I definitely want to keep this yellow in the glass. So I'm going to bring this up a little bit to get very yellow tones. And now I'm going to go ahead and open the image. Okay. So I need to duplicate this layer, and I'm going to call this the clone layer because this is what I want to do first. I want to clone anything that needs to be corrected on this. I'm not going to worry about this hand shadow here because I can get rid of that with a vignette later on. I'm going to do a white vignette. So as I go into this, I see a little bit of like white highlights that I want to clone out. So I'm going to go ahead and select my cloning stamping tool. Make sure your opacity is, like 40%, so you have more control here. Now, there's not a lot of water droplets for me to clone on this glass because they cleaned it really well before they did this object drop. So obviously that's what you want to do between every shot is you want to clean off the water really good. Make sure there's no like stains on the water, on the glass surface. Make sure there's no water there. Make sure there's no water dripping down the glass. So that does take a little bit of time to get a good image. But you can see here that I got rid of some of that white glare that was from the flash. And it looks all even. Okay. So again, you're going to have to remove any kind of like water on the glass, water dripping off the glass, anything like that that doesn't look good. But, some of it you can keep. Just use your artistic sensibilities, look at that and go, what needs to be removed and what doesn't? And if you're not sure, ask me and I'll give you some feedback. So now we're going to duplicate this layer and we're going to call this the blur layer because we're just going to add a little bit of blur to this, but not a lot because we're going to want to have some nice clean edges where that mirror is ending at the back there. So we're going to want to keep that and obviously all the details in our glass. So let's come over here to filter surface blur. And let's see what type of a blur effect we want. Well, I think it's doing it automatically here because I had it set this way before. So let's undo this. Okay, so I'm going to go to filter, blur to surface blur. So I don't really need this to be super smooth because it's already pretty smooth. So I'm going to bring down this, and I'm also going to bring the threshold down a little bit. And then I'm going to let it think and see what happens. So right now it's at 100%. This little 100% symbol here is thinking. Okay, so I think that's pretty good. So I'm going to say okay, because if I zoom in, I am going to take off some of the blur. And if you look all around, it's just pure white and it's nice and smooth. And we still have good detail, but we could take some of the blur effect off. So let's zoom in just a little bit. So here we go, before, after. Now we're going to add a layer mask to this. And I'm going to come over here and I'm going to remove some of the blur along this edge here because we want that edge to really pop out. Also along the glass. Anywhere where you see some contrast, you want to remove the blur. Now, as I do that, it doesn't really impact the background so much because it's just all white, right? So it's not like, so even if I go over here and remove some of the blur, it's not like really impacting behind it very much. But you see how important that is up here because I want to make sure this water droplets are showing. So I got to remove all the blur from that. And you can see it's starting to show up on the layer mask a little bit. I'm going to come down, maybe along the edges of the glass. I want those to show up a little more. And I definitely need to do this here. I want to make sure the water droplets show up here, along the edge of the glass, in the center. Okay, now I'm going to zoom back out, and now we are ready for our vignette, which is going to be a white vignette. Okay, we want to stay with a white vignette because that's what our main color is. The idea is for the vignette to be very subtle, so I'm just going to do a nice big round vignette around this, and at the same time I'm going to take into consideration that I have those weird shadows on the right side, so I'm going to probably need to go back in and make this a little smaller and kind of take those out. One thing you might want to do is you might want to use your little eyedropper to make sure that your vignette color is like the same white. So you see how I'm like clicking on this? Why is it doing that? Okay, yeah, good. So that the white is actually the same white that we have back in the background. Okay, so I'm going to go around the edges a little bit. I'm going to see if this is like a... So we don't want that, right? We do not want that at all. We want this here, but we do not want this. So I'm going to get rid of that. And just kind of balance it out on both sides. I'm going to zoom in. That's a little bit too much. You see, it's like a very... There we go. So I think it's about even on both sides. That's really important. And I zoom out, and now I am done. Turn it in. Don't forget. PSD file. Save it as a PSD. Don't forget to put it in the P drive. All right.